We are now talking to 4 for 4 fantasy football analyst and BetSperts handicapping analyst, John Daigle. John, what's going on, man?
Everything's going well. I think this is my fourth time
you're
on the
fourth.
show.
You're the first 4-time guest of this show.
4 time, yeah.
Yep.
I knew it was close to that.
Yep.
And yeah, not only for the hurricane, like that's also terrible, but now if you're watching the football game in the background, Tua, it looks like he just suffered his second concussion in a matter of 4 days. So like also Tua may not be doing well right now either. So we're hoping for a lot here tonight.
Well, according to their organization, it's only the first concussion.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
Well, they're getting investigated on that. So they're going to have a lot to speak about when it comes to the NFL and Roger Goodell, his team going out there and trying to investigate. Because you know the NFL, they'll sit back and they'll relax and let this go by for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden you're going to find out that they did obviously do things the wrong way, and they let Tua go on the field when they shouldn't have, and they're going to be fined for it. I believe he had a concussion. I think everybody believed he had a concussion because he was holding his head. He went in the tent. He looked like he was dizzy, and they still let him back on the field in the second half. It made no sense, but that's not why we're here talking to you. Before we get into some football conversation with you, how are you and your family doing from COVID?
Everyone's doing well. I guess that was the last time around
Yes.
September, November that y'all talked to me. Everyone's doing great. Again, I'm in Chicago. They're back in Texas. But like last year, I will be going back during the holidays and seeing them. Plus, I can play golf in the winter there. In Chicago, it's a little bit tougher to play golf in November and December.
Fantasy football has thrown a lot of people a curveball this year. There's a lot of players that you wouldn't expect to be as good as they have been in such an early season. But before we get into fantasy football, what has been surprising to you so far this early NFL season? Is there a particular team, a player? What has stood out to you so far in 3 weeks of football?
The overarching theme of fantasy football has been surprising because what we've seen is that more too high safety coverage. I'm sure you've heard it on radio, on TV, everywhere too. More cover 2 essentially has led to teams averaging 21 points per game this year, which is down significantly from not only the COVID 2020 year when teams were averaging 24.5 points per game, but also down from last year as well. Because that's what teams are doing now. They're just throwing 2 high players deep, 2 safeties, and then making quarterbacks who make $250 million guaranteed and making wide receivers who make over $100 million guaranteed catch 2-yard passes. And those egos making that money don't want to do that. That's not why we watch football. Not for everyone to play underneath, but that's what's happening. That's why man coverage is also down this year. That's why yards per carry are up this year. That's why touchdowns are down this year. It's all because of 2 high safeties, which we should honestly ban like the shift because football is becoming worse because of it.
I love you.
And so fantasy points and everything, like the overall margin between the top heavy scoring quarterbacks in fantasy and beyond them is really what separates everyone. Right now, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson, depending on an 11.5% touchdown rate. That's not going to sustain even though he's been amazing. But those 3 are averaging 29 fantasy points per game. Mahomes and Carson Wentz are the next closest at 23 fantasy points per game. Literally a 6-point difference. Like, they don't even matter compared to those 3, honestly. And so, like, that's what's happened right now is that our football got worse because of what defenses are doing now in order to allow opposing teams to have more plays per drive and force them to run the ball as opposed to explosive plays over the top. And so I think that's the big takeaway right now. I have, like everyone else, I have Russell Wilson, I have Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford. I have quarterbacks that I am looking to get off of because they haven't been good. But honestly, if you look around, there are no quarterbacks that have been good. Like even Mariota is averaging over 8 carries per game. Mariota's the QB 13 on the year. Like he doesn't matter. Like I can't take out Rodgers in my lineup for Mariota. And so, yeah, it's just like everyone's struggling right now, honestly, besides Jalen Hurts, Allen, and Lamar Jackson.
Have you seen that kind of thing happening too with a lot of the top running backs too? Because you're seeing more receivers being used as running backs, and like you're saying, short passes, RPO type things. Because a lot of people are drafting Jonathan Taylor early. He had the big first week, but struggled since. Austin Eckler, who I have in one league, Errol has it in one league as well.
Please,
he's struggled so far this year too. So is that trend going to be something to watch out for too, going into like the future, the way they evaluate running back strategy?
Maybe, but honestly, Jonathan Taylor's usage has been amazing. I mean, you could just look at week 2 whenever they trailed the Jags, and like Jonathan Taylor still outsnapped Nyheim Hines on third down. Jonathan Taylor, like I know he only had 10 touches in the entire game, but like all 3 weeks now, Taylor is being used over Hines for passing downs, and we didn't expect that. So honestly, you could argue Taylor's usage is even better than we think. And Christian McCaffrey, it's the issue of being tied to Baker Mayfield right now. So that's why running back scoring is down, like we already talked about. Top-heavy receiver scoring is up. It's basically between 6 players right now. And even Justin Jefferson, we know the past 2 games because they haven't really schemed in unique ways. In week 1, Justin Jefferson played against a linebacker or safety on 7 of his 10 targets. And then now against a shadow corner the past 2 weeks, Jeffrey Okudah and Darius Slay, we're seeing that's where 62% of his targets came from. And like, they don't know how to scheme him properly if a corner is going to shadow and move along with him. And so we'll see Vikings hopefully evolve and make life easier for him. But overall, yeah, like we're seeing actually defenses matter this year. And that's not fun. That's not fun for football or fantasy. And so that's my biggest complaint right now.
We are talking to 4for4 fantasy football analyst and BetSperts handicapping analyst, John Daigle. You look at the New York teams, you talk about the Jets, and the Jets are having a lot of woes on that offensive line. They lost Dwayne Brown to IR. He's coming back probably week 5. And now you lose George Font. He could be out till week 10, week 11. This offensive line is not going to be very good with, a young offensive lineman that they drafted, Max Mitchell. And the other one, what is it, McDermott?
Connor McDermott.
Oh, okay, who they brought back after they dropped him after he didn't make the 53 roster. So with Zach Wilson coming back here in week 4 against a Pittsburgh Steelers team, I know TJ Watt is not going to be in the game, so that does help the Jets, but does it benefit them with the young linebackers that they have right now in Pittsburgh? Where do you see this game going? And do you think that Zach Wilson, because he's not a pocket quarterback, he can move and obviously move out of the pocket and throw on the run? Could this help the offensive line out? Could this benefit the Jets that maybe the offensive line isn't as good as it was, last year?
I really worry still. And I don't want to throw someone out the window in their second year, especially when they're still developing. But Mike White, after Zach Wilson got injured, literally showed Wilson the playbook. It's, hey, take the yards that are given to you. Now, Mike White never also took a chance. He literally just dumped it out every time. But take the yards that are given to you as an NFL quarterback, depend on your explosive core for yards after the catch, and just move on. Get through the marker and move on. And even then, Zach Wilson averaged 58% completion rate before his injury, very bad. Came back, averaged a 53% completion rate after injury. Like, it didn't help his cause whatsoever. So I really do worry about Zach Wilson. I want to see what happens because you could argue their surrounding cast is even better this year.
Absolutely.
The Jets remind me of the Broncos of last year and I know the Broncos are struggling right now. I still have lots of faith in the Broncos to get it right, especially because their schedule's really easy moving forward. But honestly, the Jets have the entire core in place. Offensive line, as you mentioned, banged up, but still surrounding cast in place. They just need average quarterback play. And Wilson didn't show us last year he can do that. And so I don't want to write him off in his second year, but I would like to see something different. I think he could be better off script. We're going to see if that's true. But right now, we're just literally hoping, and we have faith, and that's it. No metrics actually point to him being improved yet.
Faith. You use the word faith. As a Jet fan, we've had faith for 50 years, and that faith has driven my head into the ground like an ostrich, okay? I don't even want to take I want my ass hitting up in the air and just hoping that I don't see all the disgusting, terrible plays and the play calling of Mike LaFleur. It is absolutely ridiculous. I think the play calls were horrendous last week, and this offensive line, which played better in the second half last year, they have looked in the beginning of the seaon, adding Laken Tomlinson, who is a Pro Bowl player, Dwayne Brown, who hasn't played yet, Elijah Vertuck, who has probably been the best offensive lineman out of all of them, McGovern, who's supposedly a top 10 center in the NFL. This offensive line has been absolutely putrid. Putrid. And you're going to sell that to me with this coming week with Zach Wilson. I feel bad for Zach. I feel bad for him because he's going to get killed. This Pittsburgh Steelers team is going to give him no mercy. No mercy this week in Pittsburgh. The fans are going to be loud, and they're going to be screaming for Kenny Pickett. I absolutely believe that's going to happen, especially if Mitchell Trubisky gets into trouble early in the game.
The only hope, more faith here, is that the Steelers' sack rate drops 10 percentage points, goes to one of the worst in the league without TJ Watt in the field. So that's the hope here. But again, like even from a clean pocket, Zach Wilson was a bottom third quarterback in completion rate last year. So we just have to see if he's learned. We have to see if he's developed in camp over the offseason.
See, this is why John has moved on now to fantasy football and sports betting, because if he had to micromanage the Chicago Bears as a Bears fan, I don't know if he'd be able to either.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Broncos. You were high on them, and you trust him to turn it around. I mean, a lot of people, including myself, not impressed with Nathaniel Hackett's coaching so far, his play calling, the fans doing time management. I mean, can you trust him to still be a good coach and turn that around, or you just think the talent's too good to overcome it?
I think the talent's too good. I still think Russell Wilson's too good. Like, honestly, they're still above average in yards per drive. Like, they're getting to the red zone. The issue is their red zone play. Russell Wilson's right now is 8 of 18 inside the 20-yard line, hasn't scored a touchdown yet. That's why Nathaniel Hackett hired an outside coordinator to help him with decision-making, in particular inside the 10-yard line whenever decisions get quicker and you need to actually be more efficient and accurate. And so I'm curious to see what happens, but honestly, for this matchup in particular, I think it's a blow-up game for the Raiders. I think they get back on track. Russell Wilson leads the league in yards per attempt against man coverage, and the Raiders have run zone coverage at the 6th highest rate in the league. So we expect him to have more opportunities against Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Also, the Broncos are still, again, above average in yards per drive. And the good news is, even in being bad in the red zone so far, Raiders are bottom 3 right now, 29th overall in red zone scoring percentage allowed. They've allowed points on over 80% of their red zone possessions against them. So I just think it makes perfect sense for the Raiders to get right, for the Broncos to get right this week. And so, yeah, I'll be betting the Broncos money line and playing Russell Wilson double stacks in DFS this week.
John, there's a lot of surprises this season, and Jacksonville has been a very big surprise. And Trevor Lawrence, a lot of people believe he's the future of the NFL, the superstar, the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady of the future. This guy is going to be everything that they weren't. And last year, he didn't have such a great season. There were parts of the season that you were just scratching your head and wondering if this guy is going to figure it out. We've seen quarterbacks, a lot of people believe we're going to be great, and they really just never cut it in the NFL. And this guy this year, you added Peterson there. You're watching, obviously, Robinson, who I believe there was no reason why they should have drafted Travis Etienne. It didn't make any sense. I understand, well, we all know who the coach was, but it didn't make any sense. And everything that we've seen so far, they're running the ball very well. The Christian Kirk move, which everybody was mocking all offseason, it's worked out for them. What has stood out to you so far with this Jacksonville Jaguars team?
They've become a one-read, quick-hitting scheme. Like, Trevor Lawrence has the league's highest completion rate the past 2 weeks because he is the second quickest time from snap to throw, only behind Tom Brady. 3-step drop, get rid of the ball underneath. That's all this offense is doing. And so I question the validity of their defense in this matchup. Like, we know Jalen Hurts has learned how to pass. Like, he's actually been extremely efficient as a passer only. He only averaged 2 yards per carry on 12 carries last week. Didn't matter whatsoever. They still spiked the Commanders. They just murdered them from the entire kickoff on. And so Jaguars defense, we know, allowed big plays to Washington. They beat Washington. They probably shouldn't have won that game, but they beat Washington in week 1, even though Carson Wentz for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. They won what was actually a good matchup to bet on in week 2 because the Colts were fresh off 91 plays in week 1 and then had to travel East Coast for an early kickoff. It just wasn't a good spot for them whatsoever. That's why even in DFS, like Jaguars defense was actually highly owned because like it looked like a good spot for the Jaguars. And then last week, they hit the nuts. Injured Justin Herbert and then center Corey Linsley and left tackle Rashawn Slater injured in game. So I actually don't think Jaguars defense has been tested yet. They may be good. I don't know. But I still just think they're the same crop of players from last year. I think Jalen Hurts and the Eagles just put it on them this week. So honestly, like, even though Jaguars offense has improved, they're running a better scheme. I do like the Eagles. I like the 6.5 points this week for them to cover.